Imagine you are an airline pilot who found love in the skies, marrying a flight attendant who seemed to be your soulmate. You built a life together, had children, and shared many dreams. But then, after 15 years of what seemed like a perfect marriage, everything begins to unravel. Your wife receives a work opportunity that takes her to France, and you stay in the United States to start your own business. Until one day, you discover a shocking email on her phone, revealing an infidelity that was hidden beneath the surface of your perfect life. What would you do if you discovered that the person you trusted most in the world was living a double life? The encounter between Mike and Lisa in the heights of the sky on a transatlantic flight had all the charm of a modern romance, but with a touch of destiny. Mike, a pilot who knew every nuance of the sky, found himself completely disarmed by the presence of Lisa, the flight attendant whose smile lit up the narrow aisle of the plane. During a particularly long flight, they shared life stories, smiles, and eventually phone numbers. "Have you always been a flight attendant?" Mike asked, offering her a cup of coffee during a quiet break. "For as long as I can remember," Lisa replied, her eyes sparkling. "But tell me, was flying always your dream?" "Oh yes, there's something about being above the clouds. It's like none of the world's problems can reach me up there," he confided, his gaze lost in the blue immensity outside the window. The mutual charm was instant and undeniable. What began as a casual conversation quickly turned into dates after flights, dinners in different cities each night, and long walks in exotic destinations. With each new encounter, the connection between them only grew stronger, weaving a web of complicity and affection that seemed destined to last. When Mike proposed to her, 2 years after that first flight together, it was at sunrise in Paris, with the horizon painted in gold and the open sky as witness. "Lisa, you've made my world as vast as the sky I love so much. Will you continue this journey with me forever?" With tears in her eyes and a smile worth 1,000 words, Lisa said yes, sealing their commitment with a passionate kiss. They didn't know it yet, but that was just the beginning of a lifelong journey filled with love, challenges, and shared promises. After a remarkable career as a pilot, Mike decided it was time to open a new chapter in his life. The transition from flying planes to diving into the world of technology was challenging, but he was excited about the possibilities. He dedicated himself to setting up his own technology company, an old dream that was finally taking shape. While Mike was immersed in projects and meetings with investors, Lisa received an opportunity she couldn't refuse. "Mike, you're not going to believe this," she said one night as he was going over some documents. "I've been invited to be the director of expansion for a multinational company. They want me to start in France." Mike looked at her, surprised and proud. "That's amazing, love. But what about us? They need me there for a year. It's a big opportunity for me, and for us, financially," Lisa explained, a mix of excitement and apprehension in her voice. After much discussion and consideration, they decided that Lisa would go to France with the children, while Mike would remain in the United States to stabilize his company. "We'll make this work," Mike said, holding her hands. "I know it will be difficult, but we're strong, and with visits and video calls, time will fly by." With this decision, Lisa moved to France, taking on her role with fervor, while Mike faced the challenges of a first-time entrepreneur. The distance was a test for their marriage, filled with longing and adjustments, but both were committed to making their arrangement work for the good of the family. The first months of Lisa's new life on French soil were a mix of excitement and challenge. She adapted to the new culture and responsibilities of her role with an enthusiasm that made her shine in every video call with Mikey. "The work is intense, but I'm learning so much," she would share with him, her face illuminated by the glow of the computer during their nightly conversations. "On this side, the company is starting to take off," Mike would reply, a mix of pride and weariness evident in his voice. "But nothing compares to how much I miss you all." The distance was a formidable adversary, but the bonds that united them were strong. Each conversation was a bridge that kept them connected, a constant reminder of the love that endured despite the miles that separated them. Mike began to feel a growing void with the absence of Lisa and the children, a home that now echoed more silence than laughter. One night, as Mike browsed through the recent photos Lisa had sent of the little ones on a walk through Paris, his heart tightened. "They're growing up so fast," he murmured to himself, the sadness weighing on his chest. Those captured moments were sweet, but also bitter, for he was not there to share them. Amidst this whirlwind of emotions, the incident with the email happened. An unexpected notification on his phone that, unbeknownst to him, would change everything. The email was an intrusion, a revelation he never expected, and certainly not in this way. As he read the shocking words in the email, "I'm happy with your work performance and the performance of your mouth," Mike felt as if the ground opened up beneath his feet. The betrayal was a stab that crossed the ocean, and he felt disoriented, betrayed, and alone in a house that suddenly seemed too big and empty. The words burned on his phone screen, each letter a dagger in his heart. He sat down, the device still in his hands, as a storm of emotions flooded him. Mike's anguish was palpable. He paced back and forth in the living room, each step echoing like a hammer in his head. "How could this happen?" he muttered to himself, trying to process the pain of betrayal. The idea of calling Lisa and confronting her crossed his mind several times, but something held him back. He knew that once that conversation began, there would be no turning back. The fear of hearing confirmation of his worst fears was paralyzing. Determined not to take any rash action, Mike chose to wait, to observe, to collect more evidence before confronting Lisa. Perhaps there was some plausible explanation, something he was overlooking. But deep down, he felt he knew the truth, even though every fiber of his being desperately wished he was wrong. In the days that followed, Mike struggled to digest the revelation. He found himself torn between confronting Lisa by phone or waiting to speak in person, an agonizing choice. The trust he had placed in her in their marriage seemed to have crumbled. Every moment they spent together, every memory built over the years, was now under the shadow of excruciating doubt. Mike spent sleepless nights, tossing and turning in bed, the images of the emails flashing through his mind. How could she? He asked himself repeatedly, the weight of the betrayal crushing his chest. During the day, he distracted himself with work, but the nights were long and lonely, filling him with anguish and resentment. With every notification on his phone, his heart leapt, fearing and hoping at the same time for another painful revelation. Finally, the notification he so dreaded arrived. The email's subject line was provocative and frightening. "No one will steal your place." Trembling, Mike opened the email and read the words that cut him even deeper. The sender praised Lisa as the most incredible woman at work, describing in detail their intimate relationship, something he claimed to have never experienced with another woman. "How can she be so different from the person I thought I knew?" Mike whispered to himself, pain and confusion intertwining in his mind. He felt a growing rage, a fury that began consuming any shred of doubt he may have had about the situation. On impulse, Mike began typing a response to the email, his hands shaking with anger. "Who do you think you are? What have you done to the woman I love?" But before sending, he stopped, took a deep breath, and deleted the text. "No," he thought, "this won't help. I need to face this in person." Resolved and heavy-hearted, Mike bought a plane ticket for the next day. As he packed his bags, he mentally prepared for the confrontation ahead. It was a mix of fear and determination, a need to put an end to the anguish consuming him. "I will find out the truth, no matter how painful," he promised himself, snapping his suitcase shut with resolute finality. The night before the trip was long and restless. Lying in bed, Mike stared at the ceiling, replaying every possible scenario of the looming confrontation. "What if she keeps denying everything?" he thought, his heart tightening at the possibility. "What if this is all some incredible misunderstanding?" Finally, morning arrived, bringing with it a gray sky and a light rain that seemed to mirror Mike's state of mind. He closed his suitcase, had a long coffee, and headed to the airport. With each step toward the departure gate, his resolve strengthened. "It's now," he thought, "time to find out the truth." On the flight to France, Mike tried to prepare what he would say and how he would react upon seeing Lisa. He knew the confrontation would be inevitable, but part of him still hoped for some reasonable explanation, some misunderstanding that could be cleared up. Reality, however, seemed too bleak to allow for such hopes. Recalling the happy moments they had shared, he felt a mixture of nostalgia and resentment, a painful combination that prevented him from finding peace. "How could you do this to our family?" Mike rehearsed under his breath, looking at the sad reflection in his small airplane window. "What didn't I give you that you found in him?" The questions piled up in his mind, each one heightening the sense of betrayal. During the flight, he tried to sleep, but his rest was intermittent and filled with restless dreams. In one of those dreams, he saw Lisa, smiling at him as she did on their wedding day. He awoke with a start, the reality of the present cruelly invading the comfort of the past. The sounds of the in-flight service brought him back, and he refused the food, his stomach churned by anxiety. As the plane began its descent, the reality of his mission hit him with full force. "I'm just hours away from possibly changing my life forever," he thought, gripping his seatbelt tighter than necessary. Landing in France didn't just mean arriving in a foreign country. It meant facing the possibility of his world crumbling further. Upon disembarking in France, the European winter chill seemed to reflect the ice that had formed in his heart. Making his way to Lisa's last known address, Mike rehearsed his speech, his questions, his accusation. Yet, upon arriving at the location, his plan for a direct confrontation began to unravel. The prospect of seeing his children, of unraveling the truth in front of them, brought a new layer of complexity to his emotional turmoil. "How can I do this in front of the kids?" Mike questioned himself, his heart heavy as he walked the snow-covered streets toward the apartment. They don't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. The idea of his children witnessing the confrontation made him reconsider the direct approach he had planned. Arriving at the building, he took a deep breath before entering. The lobby was quiet, only Mike's footsteps echoing as he climbed the stairs. With each step, his resolve wavered, but the need to confront Lisa and hear the truth from her own mouth propelled him forward. Finally, standing before the apartment door, Mike paused, his hand hesitating in the air before knocking. "This will change everything," he whispered to himself, his hand trembling not just from the cold, but from the avalanche of emotions he felt. With a sigh, he knocked on the door, prepared to face whatever was on the other side. As he stood at the door, he took a moment to gather his courage before ringing the bell. When Lisa opened the door, the surprise on her face was evident. "Mike, how are you here?" She was pale, her expression mixing confusion and fear. "Can we talk?" Mike's voice was steady, but his emotions bubbled just below the surface. "It's important, Lisa." Lisa nodded hesitantly and made space for him to enter. The apartment was quiet, the sounds of the city in the background barely perceptible. Mike looked around, the family photos on the walls, the children's toys on the floor. Everything seemed so normal, so painfully ordinary. "Mike, Lisa began, but was interrupted. "I saw the emails, Lisa." The emails between you and him. I need to know the truth, Mike cut in, the urgency clear in his voice. Lisa swallowed hard, her gaze dropping to the floor before meeting Mike's eyes again. I can explain, she murmured, her voice almost a whisper. Then explain, Mike demanded, the weight of the situation pressing each word. The confrontation between Mike and Lisa was tense and charged with emotion. Lisa seemed genuinely shocked by the accusations and vehemently denied the validity of the emails. She insisted that someone was trying to sabotage their marriage, but for Mike, the evidence was too clear to be ignored. The trust had been broken, and he could no longer look at her the same way. Determined to leave the apartment with his children, Mike headed for the door. Lisa, how can you expect me to believe this? Mike spoke, his voice laden with frustration and despair. After everything we've built together, how can you think someone would do this just to drive us apart? Lisa, tears in her eyes, tried to approach him. Mike, please, you have to believe me. I would never do anything to hurt our family. These emails, I don't know where they came from, but they're not true. But Mike was unyielding, his mind already made up to distance himself. No, Lisa, I can't do this. He tried to maintain his composure, but the pain was visible in his eyes. At that moment, Lisa made one last desperate attempt to stop him from leaving. She ran to the door, closing and locking it before Mike could exit. You can't just take the kids like this. We need to work this out, please, Mike. The argument escalated, and Lisa, in a burst of fear and frustration, ended up calling the police, claiming Mike was threatening her. When the officers arrived, they found a distraught Mike and a distressed Lisa, each telling a different version of the story. Mike tried to explain his side, presenting the emails as proof of his suspicion and Lisa's alleged infidelity. However, without concrete evidence beyond the emails, and faced with Lisa's claims that she was being threatened, the officers seemed to doubt Mike's account. The tension and frustration in the air were palpable, and after a brief deliberation, the officers decided to detain Mike, considering him a potential threat to Lisa's safety. Sir, we need you to come with us to sort this out in a controlled environment, one of the officers said, his expression serious and professional. But I haven't done anything. She's lying. Mike protested, his voice rising in desperation and confusion. You've got this all wrong. I just wanted to talk to her, that's all. Lisa watched, pale and trembling, as the officers handcuffed Mike. I'm so sorry, Mike. I never wanted this to happen, she said, tears flowing freely now. Mike was led out of the apartment, his mind still trying to process how quickly things had escalated. Looking back over his shoulder, he saw Lisa crying on the doorstep and his children peeking out scared from the window. The weight of what had happened began to sink in, leaving him with a sense of powerlessness and despair. As Mike was taken to the police station, the silence in the squad car was deafening. He felt like he was in a nightmare, unable to wake up. At the station, the formalities dragged on as he was processed. Sitting in a small interrogation room, Mike was still trying to understand how things had reached this point. Please, you have to believe me. I didn't threaten anyone, Mike pleaded to the officers taking his statement. I just wanted to understand the situation with my wife, that's all. One of the officers, an older man with an understanding expression, looked at Mike. We understand your situation, sir, but we have to follow protocol. Your actions were interpreted as a threat, and your wife filed the complaint. Mike felt a mix of anger and desperation. This isn't fair, he muttered. It's just a big misunderstanding. Meanwhile in France, Lisa was at home, grappling with guilt and fear over having called the police. She knew things had spiraled out of control in a way she had never imagined. Sitting on her couch looking at the family photos scattered around the living room, she wondered if there was any way to mend what had been broken. Mike's words echoed in her mind, reminding her of the love they once shared. At the station, as he waited to be interrogated, Mike reflected on how quickly everything had unraveled. How did this all come undone so fast? He asked himself, frustration and confusion weighing on his shoulders. Sitting in a cold, uncomfortable chair, he tried to piece the puzzle together, every memory of Lisa now tinged with the shadow of doubt. Mike's deportation was a swift and humiliating process. Back in the United States, he found himself isolated and struggling to mount a legal defense from a distance. The forced separation from his children and the pending accusations weighed on him like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. The challenge now was not only to clear his name, but also to fight to maintain some kind of relationship with his children, who were now in Lisa's temporary custody in France. While Mike strove to find a competent attorney who could represent him internationally, Lisa consolidated her position in France. She portrayed the situation as a necessary measure to protect herself and the children from a man she described as unstable and dangerous. The ensuing legal battle was intense and emotionally draining for all involved. Confronted with the painful reality of losing contact with his children and his reputation, tarnished by Lisa's accusations, Mike felt desperate and betrayed to the extreme. Unable to passively accept his situation, he decided to take a drastic step to turn the tables. He hired a highly recommended hacker and, with a mix of anger and determination, tasked them with hacking into Lisa's and her boss's systems. The goal was to expose any compromising communication that might exist between the two. The hacker, efficient at their craft, quickly accessed a vast amount of confidential data. Emails, text messages, and even intimate photos were uncovered and meticulously compiled. Mike, although initially hesitant about the moral implications of his plan, was consumed by a desire for justice, or revenge. He ordered that everything be released online, creating a scandal that quickly gained massive attention on the internet. The repercussions were instantaneous and devastating. Lisa's and her boss's careers were tarnished under the weight of the leaked evidence, and public opinion quickly turned against them. Mike watched the consequences of his actions, feeling a complex mix of satisfaction and remorse. He knew he had crossed a line, but at that moment it seemed the only path to balance the injustices he felt he had suffered. With the leak of the compromising files, the consequences for Lisa and the company she worked for were catastrophic. The multinational stock plummeted to alarming levels, reflecting the gravity of the scandal involving one of its top executives and the investors' shaken confidence. Lisa was immediately fired from her position as Director of Expansion, her professional reputation irreparably damaged. Faced with this new reality, Mike saw an opportunity to reverse the situation in his favor. He filed a legal action to obtain full custody of the children, alleging that Lisa, now unemployed and embroiled in a public scandal, did not have suitable conditions to raise the children. The legal battle slowly came to an end, and Mike was determined to rebuild his life, focusing on providing a stable and loving environment for his children. He knew the journey to recovery would be long and full of challenges, but he was committed to doing his best for his children. And you, what would you do in Mike's or Lisa's place? Comment on what you would do, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to keep following more stories like this. I'll see you in a new story.